Amy, welcome.
Thank you. Oh, so this is a new way of doing this. Hello, President King, President Pro Tem Bennett. I'm here today to ask for your approval of a resolution approving our 2014 annual action plan. The action plan is our application to HUD outlining how we would use the entitlement funds. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. I can go through a PowerPoint presentation, but you're expediting business pretty well here today, so I'll wait for your direction.
Okay, I think we're pretty familiar with it, so.
Don wants to speak.
Councilmember Knight.
Yeah, I'm going to be reluctantly supporting this because we have to have it in by Friday to be able to get the money. But I want to go in and repeat, I do not see that the town hall that we had on the 27th of October as being an adequate public forum for this, even though that language is still in there. We talked a lot on the budget. There was nothing talked about how we're going to use any of these three funds on that day. I'm also still concerned of the ratio administrative costs being 8 or 9% while we're only spending $100,000 for blight removal and helping only 16 people get into new home loans. So I think for the future, I hope that next year that we get a little bit more chance to look at this and that we do focus on trying to fix some of those things. And not only that, as well as we do the 5-year plan. Otherwise, next year I will be voting no, regardless of the financial impact.
Thank you. I do want to just clarify that the citizen participation plan is what drives our public input process, and that hearing is identified in the plan as a hearing. We are modifying that citizen participation plan. I have a draft from the consultant. Staff will be looking at it. We'll do a stakeholder meeting, and that will ultimately come back to you for approval. So that would be a great opportunity for you to change the process. We're also out of sync. Our program year is April 1 to March 31. We're still out of sync with the city municipal budget year, but we're working on the feasibility of moving that so that all of this happens with the municipal budget process. But that wouldn't happen until 2016.
Okay, Councilmember Miller.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. You know, I'm concerned in this because it sounds like there was concern that there hadn't been enough economic development activities taking place in the plan and the current 5-year plan, but that the intent was to shift more of the dollars toward that. And my concern is shifting dollars from getting people that are on the street into beds is where the focus should be, not on making places more. And I think some of the terms that were used didn't even identify them as places where there was homeless and poor, but they were targeted economic zones. So what defines an economic zone? Where people are homeless or where we'd like to develop an area? And so I'm reluctant to head in that direction. And I'm also concerned about the emergency shelter and transitional housing needs vis-a-vis the audit. And were we required to repay back some of those funds?
No.
Because of non-use?
No. The grant and that emergency, the grant that you're referring to was a grant that we received in 2007. It was a 5-year grant, and it required that it was served homeless, disabled folks with some income. And what happened was, in the first 2 years of that grant, there was nobody in the community with the capacity to serve those folks and meet the federal requirements. So it took us 2 years to find an organization that could use those funds. So that's why you're seeing that those funds weren't expended. It took us 2 years to find an organization that could use it. The other piece is that it's a full subsidy. It's based on a full subsidy to provide rent and utilities, those costs for those folks. As they get into the program and they earn more income, they have to pay for a higher percentage of their costs. And so we will never, if they're successful, we will never spend down those entire grants. So now we no longer get 5-year grants, we get annual grants. Hopefully that clarifies.
Okay. And then my other, the concern is, you know, I talked about economic opportunity zones and them being the focus of of these dollars, and I'm just not sure, while they're in need of renewal, I'm not sure if there's any evidence displayed that there's a problem with people not being able to have housing in those areas. So I just want to keep the focus where it should be, on the people that need these resources, not on some plans that we have to make a certain area nicer. Not that I don't want to do that,
Right.
but these are dollars that are intended by the federal government and the city to be going to help those who are most in need of housing.
So I do want to clarify that there are no funds in 2014 invested in economic opportunities. They may be there may be funds invested in some of those geographic areas that we've identified as economic opportunity zones. We have to serve low, moderate income areas and individuals. So what we would do is identify folks who may live in Southeast Colorado Springs, because there are no designated neighborhood strategy areas. Look at those folks in Southeast Colorado Springs and target more rehab dollars for housing, that type of thing. So in 2014, there is no economic, those boxes aren't checked. Now, 2015 to 2019 consolidated plan, that will come back to you. So if there are, if we don't make the case for economic opportunity programs, that sort of thing, you have the authority to approve or not approve that plan. So that will come back to you then. This year, we were doing some feasibility and doing some research on what it would take to implement economic opportunity programs, such as facade improvements or workforce programs, that kind of thing. But they are not in this plan for 2014.
Well, it looks like you're, I guess, so this is for the follow-on, this section, but, you know, when it talks about South Academy, it says, in order, you know, we can focus on neighborhood strategy programs and a geographic location versus where the need is greatest. So, for example, if Southeast is in greater need, does then, because we designated an area for renewal, we're going to focus on that? You know, I'm just not convinced of, you know, and the way it's described in the South Academy EOZ is the area lacks a sense of place and community. Well, in the North Nevada, it's unimproved, unappealing roadway and streetscape.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that those should
No,
be
that's a fair
criteria
qualification.
for whether or not we're focusing funds in those areas.
You're absolutely right. We should have focused too on the low, moderate income populations, especially in the Southeast Opportunity Zone. And that wasn't stated in here. So we could state that piece. We do have to, HUD requires that we identify geographic priority areas, and we're rethinking how we identify those areas. We have, we've hired consultants to help us through the consolidated plan process. We're meeting with stakeholders, and I think you'll see with the 2015 to 2019 plan, we'll take a different approach with that. But you're absolutely right that we did not mention the income issues in that South Academy Opportunity Zone in particular, and there are low-income areas, census tracts in the North Nevada Opportunity Zone. So that was not made very clear in here.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Collins.
Hi, Amy, how are you today?
Hi.
Did you check into the diversification clause that the federal government added into these grants like I'd asked you to? Like, for example, building one of these low-income housing areas in the Broadmoor area?
We, yeah, I mean, part of the requirements when we're evaluating projects is trying not to layer affordable housing projects in areas of low-income concentration. So trying to, yes, we want housing throughout the community so that people have housing options. So I don't know specifically what your question is.
Well, apparently there was new requirements mandated by the federal government, and I never got any feedback on that. I read it in the federal legislation. But my concern with this, with housing the homeless, is a year ago I had an addiction counselor friend. She'd actually worked with Ted Bundy and everything, and she asked to have a meeting with Dr. Holmes, and I know Dr. Holmes isn't working with the city anymore with his program. A lot of the homeless, the best way to get rid of the homeless is to give them a bus ticket back to their families. And this isn't even taken into consideration. It's like the taxpayer has to fund the homeless for housing. What they do is they go in, and I live in Southeast, I represent Southeast, they go into a low-income housing area, they drag it down, and then they move on to the next new low-income housing facility. I just don't think that's right for the taxpayer. The federal government is what, $17 trillion in debt. They give money to the state gives money to the city, and we're enabling these folks to live off the taxpayers. I myself worked 2-3 jobs to put myself through a master's. I do not like the fact that a lot of the homeless are trying to get away from the police. For example, you know, they don't want to pay child support. They just don't want to be found. And so now we're going to provide low-income housing to some of these folks for the homeless. We're enabling these folks. Having an undergraduate degree in behavioral science, I am not into enabling. I think the best way to make these people grow is, you know, to make them work personally. You know, you talk about jobs, that's all I hear. Federal, state, city. We need jobs, jobs, jobs. And, you know, it's pretty interesting that way. I cannot support this. Again, it's grants, it's the taxpayer enabling the federal government, the state government, and the city government to have low-income housing. Thank you.